When prosecutors withhold evidence, which is what it looks like in the Idaho 4 Kohberger case, there can be big problems in the legal arena.
We're going to look at a case where law enforcement withheld evidence until trial. Today, we're looking at the case of Timothy Verrill, who was on trial for murder in New Hampshire. I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And today we're going to discuss what went wrong and why this case is now being considered a mistrial.
Well, there was a mistrial in the first trial. The allegations are that the defendant, by the name of Timothy Verrill, back in 2019, committed 2 stabbing deaths, and he's now facing first-degree murder charges in a trial that's ongoing right now and being covered by Court TV. But in the first trial back in 2019, what happened was in the middle of the trial, it was disclosed that the prosecution and or the police did not disclose certain evidence. So there were 2 days of hearings, and then there was a mistrial. Now there's more legal gesticulations, I'll say, that occurred in this case. But that's the essence of it, is that in the middle of trial 1, it was determined that certain evidence was not provided to the defense. And that causes a big problem.
A big reason we wanted to talk about this case is because you can see some parallels where, for example, there's been a lot of discussion around the Kohberger case, and if things aren't done correctly there, then we might be dealing with this for years and years to come. And with the Murdoch trial, we're seeing that they're still trying to go back and forth with that. I think that this case is very representative about how if things aren't done correctly, you're going to be in for a lot of trouble in the long term. And now we're going to have to see what happens with this.
Yeah, this case is ongoing as we record this podcast now. It's been ongoing for about 10 days, and it will continue to go for another, I'm told, 3, maybe even 4 weeks. So imagine the expense and the stress of all that when the first trial ended in a mistrial. But in order to get some insight and some details about what happened, let's speak to a reporter who's covering this trial, and his name is Damen Fiser, and he's with In-Depth NH.
Let's go take a look.
Okay, we are with reporter Damen Fiser of In-Depth New Hampshire, who is covering the Verrill trial, I should say. Damen, what's going on? I understand that the first trial ended in a mistrial because the prosecution and the investigators withheld evidence. Can you fill us in a little bit more on that?
Well, that was in 2019, and about 2 weeks into the trial, prosecutors came to defense, said we have these documents that we should have turned over. And then it happened a day later and hours after that. So 3 times during the first trial, they're weeks into it, and they turn over all of this evidence, and a lot of it is exculpatory. It points to other people as being deeply involved in the murder and not Mr. Verrill.
So none of this evidence was actually provided to the defense during the pretrial discovery?
Correct. And some of it indicates that these folks who could have been involved, they were either informants for the DEA or they were under investigation by the DEA. So it points to all sorts of things and raises a lot of interesting questions about what's going on here.
Now, I understand the case went up to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and Mr. Verrill wanted the indictment dismissed, but that didn't happen. They said, no, your remedy is a second trial.
Yeah.
How is what happened back in the first trial, how is that impacting the second? When I read that maybe this is impacting the credibility of the prosecution and the investigators.
Well, the defense hasn't started their case yet. They're still going through the prosecution's case. So it's been a lot of very methodical laying out of the evidence. They do have fingerprints, text messages, things like that. But it's starting to crack. This afternoon, I expect that they're going to bring in an audio recording of a Stephen Clow, who was a witness in the first trial. He's since passed since the first trial. But within the evidence that has come to light, turns out he's a DEA informant. He's a
Oh my.
member of a motorcycle club that was dealing drugs, allegedly. And he's also allegedly at the scene of the murder with Christine Sullivan's boyfriend, who was supposedly out of town, and another man named Spider Mike Ditaria. And they were there at the scene of the murder, not Mr. Verrill, according to the evidence that's since been revealed.
Two other people were at the scene, and besides not Mr. Verrill, was this part of the evidence that had not come out in the first trial?
Correct. So that came to light, and now they're going to have this sort of testimony from beyond the grave this afternoon, in which Mr. Clough, they're going to play a recording of his previous testimony, but there are credibility issues with him, and I don't know how you cross-examine a recording of a dead man.
Yeah, that would go in under the dead man statute is what they call it. And that's an evidentiary rule in pretty much every jurisdiction and under the federal rules of evidence that if there's a recording of somebody that's no longer around, then that flies over the hearsay rules. I'm interested if you could tell me, what other type of evidence was withheld, and did the police have any explanation for how this happened? I mean, they all know that under Brady, they've got to provide this in pretrial discovery.
It's interesting. More of the stuff that was withheld. One witness who said Christine Sullivan's boyfriend, Dean Smoronk, tried to hire him to kill her. Multiple people who said Dean Smoronk wanted Christine Sullivan dead.
Oh my.
And some corroboration of the murder for hire plot. I mean, there's a lot that they just a lot of people who were involved, apparently, a lot of people who were supposedly at the scene of the murder, not Mr. Verrill, all over it, and the DEA is all over it. A lot of this information didn't come out because at the same time the state police are investigating the murder, the DEA is investigating Dean Smoronk and Christine Sullivan's drug operating ring.
Was that part of the rationale as to why this evidence was not disclosed in the first trial, that there were two or multiple agencies investigating that just weren't talking to each other? Is that what it was? Well,
that's partly it. The main reason they did an investigation, the state police did an investigation of state police. That's how they do it in New Hampshire. And they found that it was poor record keeping and outdated data. Poor record keeping. Yeah. Some oopsies.
Oopsie, no biggie.
What's interesting is the state police investigators who, the lead investigator on this case, Brian Strong, he was made the commander of the major crime unit after he was found to have mishandled this evidence. Everybody involved in that first investigation, they got promotions.
Oh my. And is that both in the New Hampshire State Police and the DEA, or just within the state police?
Just in the state police. So, you have to ask yourself what's going on here. You've got this evidence that implicates the DEA involved in, at least with informants investigating this, and their informants are allegedly taking part in this murder. That gets hidden. The state police who, mishandled that evidence, they get promoted. So, you have to start asking questions about what exactly is going on here.
Well, you said something about a bookkeeping error. Now, this is a murder trial. This is big, and there are homicide detectives, and that's all they do. That's their only job. My understanding was there was about a 2-day hearing during the first trial into what happened and how it happened. What was the I'm sorry, that doesn't fly with me that it was a bookkeeping error. What was the explanation for the fact that in a major homicide trial, exculpatory and other police evidence just wasn't disclosed?
There really is no explanation that's satisfactory. Their explanation is they made an error. They didn't realize they had this.
It doesn't even make sense to me, like, I'm more surprised. I guess I question that if it was intentional, that it wouldn't have come out in the first place. I don't even know how they even came to sharing this information if it's a bookkeeping error that they miss. It's just like, "Oh,
Right.
oopsie, we suddenly found all this information, here you go."
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I can't explain why they did this. If we take it at face value that they made an error, wow, it's a pretty big error. And why is everybody who made that mistake not getting disciplined in some way?
Not only not being disciplined, but according to what you've just told us, they were promoted to advanced jobs. So,
Correct.
we all make mistakes. We're all human. Yes, I've made mistakes, but this is a major double murder trial. There's discovery that goes back and forth. Anyone that's involved in investigative material knows about Brady. Attorneys know that. Police know that. And in addition, I can imagine, I don't know. I wasn't there. I haven't looked at the court docket, but I can only imagine that in addition to Brady, there was discovery. I mean, every criminal defense attorney is going to send out discovery. So it's hard for me to imagine that it was just an error, because there would have been internal memoranda and there would have been discovery requests. Would there not have been?
What I was thinking of yesterday is when a police officer, because the state police are unionized, as are all state employees, and if they are even given a letter of reprimand, they have a right to appeal that to the personal appeals board. And then there's hearings and there's discovery. And if they feel that they were improperly disciplined in any kind of way, it all becomes public. Well, they weren't disciplined; they were given raises and promotions. So anything of what actually happened there, we're never going to know. We're never going to know what the results of that investigation found.
So,
why this
all right. So I'm a member of the New Hampshire Bar, so I have to be very careful about what I say. It just troubles me, though, that we have all these entities, and it sounds like one party is saying somebody else made a mistake and another. Well, where did this total void come from? Was it the DEA? Was it the state police? Did the prosecuting attorney at the New Hampshire Attorney General's office fail to ask the right questions? I mean, something went wrong, and I'm just curious as to where it went.
Well, I mean, the AG's office here in New Hampshire is completely overwhelmed. I don't think they have enough staff, and a murder trial is difficult. It's time consuming. That these guys are stretched thin, and so I can imagine it's pretty easy for someone in the AG's office. They're relying on their investigators to hand over their evidence. Here's the discovery request. Let's make sure we've got it. And then all of a sudden they find out, oh no, wait, there was more.
Yeah, like I said, I don't want to cast any aspersions, and I know a lot of good people work at the Attorney General's office, but I'm just wondering where it was. Isn't there some accountability? Doesn't someone in the state police or someone in the DEA or someone somewhere say, guys, we have a murder trial going on. We need to find all the evidence, because it's not just like all right, I misspell a word on one of my documents. All right, that's a bookkeeping error, or
Right.
I forget to put in the, $2 of postage that I should have had in my QuickBooks. That's a bookkeeping error. But this is a major event. 2 people are dead. 1 person is on the stand. We always, recognize in this office the presumption of innocence. So this man's life is on the line. And from what you're telling us, there are 2 other potential suspects. So I mean, doesn't a little red light go off somewhere that somebody says, wait a minute, guys, we got to sit down and be serious here? And I think that was a rhetorical question. So question number 2 is, have any steps been taken to assure that this never happens again? That, the law enforcement from that heretofore, when there's a murder trial, they'll have a conference and sit down and unearth everything?
Gosh, you'd hope so. But accountability and transparency and New Hampshire law enforcement don't really mix. It's hard to not to be too cynical about it, but there is no oversight of law enforcement in New Hampshire.
Wow.
There's no independent oversight. The only oversight is the Attorney General's office, which is the top law enforcement agency in the state.
Wow.
And
Go ahead.
well, it's just that's what it is, and the state police do what they want.
Let me ask you this. I read somewhere that this material was all in various forms, but there were a ton of CD-ROM discs. There was a lot of paper. There was other information stored. What format did all this information take? Do you know?
Well, as you can say, it was in various forms. I mean, you've got recordings of interviews, you've got transcripts, you've got text messages, investigative reports. You name it. That's what it was. And when you look at the case that the state has with Mr. Verrill, it's pretty strong. So you get the sense that they feel they've got a strong case, even without this information.
So maybe that's what happened going in. They figured they had a strong case and they didn't have to disclose this stuff. Is that where the mistake was made?
Well, if by disclosing this, they're revealing informants for federal law enforcement, and they feel they got the right guy, and this is speculation on my part, but if they feel they've got the right guy and this information can out sources for federal law enforcement, maybe they're going to roll the dice. But again, that's my speculation.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. All right. Do you have anything else to add to this before we wrap it up here?
Well, it's nice when people pick up on the fact that there's something strange going on in New Hampshire law enforcement.
Thank you, Damien. We appreciate your insight on the case.
All right. Thank you, Damien, very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Talk to you later.
I found that interview really interesting, and hopefully we will touch base with him again and find out what's happening as this trial goes forward. But similarly to the Kohberger Idaho 4 case, the nation is watching. This whole trial is being televised live on court TV. They had their opening arguments. Now they're having witnesses, and it will continue to show the nation what happens in a courtroom. And one of the interesting things is that the evidence that was withheld in that first trial, the prosecution may not use in the second trial, although the defense may use it. So maybe the prosecution in Idaho should pay attention to that, because if evidence is withheld, as it is being withheld now, let's take a look at all of those many discovery requests in 4 at this time, maybe to be updated, motions to compel. There could be a mistrial, and no one wants that, especially, the families of the 4 people who lost their lives in that horrible crime in Moscow, Idaho, back on November 13th of 2022.
I also think that it's just a shame, because I think a lot of people already, I mean, I've mentioned this before, have distrust with the legal system, have distrust with law enforcement. Andrew, I know you're a member of the bar. I'm not going to say anything to get you in trouble, but it's a shame that we have such just, I mean, it's just messy. There's no other words to explain this. I think that if things are done right, it can be avoided. Nobody's perfect, but sometimes you start to question, and I think that's the real issue, is that a lot of people, whether it's an accident or not, now what do you believe if you just keep seeing things like this happening and in situations this serious? It's really hard as a consumer of media, and I think this is why a lot of people have issues with trust with the mainstream media, because they're also going to be working in favor to keep their sources happy. And
yeah, the distrust in the legal system happens for a couple of different reasons. And I've said before, and I'll say again, that my experiences have all been positive. Many, not all, but many of my cases are civil litigation. And the public and the reporters really don't have an interest in it, and they don't, if you're trying a car accident case or a medical malpractice case, for the most part, not always, there's just very little interest. The reporters aren't there. I've stepped over the camera cables when I've been trying a case in court, and in one of the other courtrooms, one of these high profile cases is going on, and I look around, do I know any of the reporters? Actually, maybe I do, but anyhow, so the cases that I tend to have covered don't attract this type of high scrutiny, and I have generally had really good experiences. I've gone into the courtroom, and lo and behold, the judge has read every word of my memo and the other side's memo, and they ask you really pointed questions, get right to the issues, and the case goes forward, and that's pretty much it. But one of the reasons for the mistrust in the system is that mistakes do happen. We, are looking at this case now where there was a mistrial because the prosecution withheld tons and tons of evidence. The other reason, though, sometimes it's not fair, because I see a lot of it in the comments of not just this channel, but other channels. People just misinterpret what's going on. People will see a little thing, and I'm trying to think of an example, but people sometimes just misinterpret what's been happening, and they're not certain. And so they just kind of, make statements about it. And I don't want to go down the rabbit holes of the Linda Lane footage or the Banfield footage or Demetrius and Emma, because all those things are out there and there's no direct connection. But people have made comments about, well, we know that the police went from the Banfield down to 11. No, we don't know that. Is it a possibility? I don't know, because I haven't been there. I haven't read everything, because what's been disclosed doesn't really get into that. So it's kind of, so there's a couple of different reasons for why there's mistrust. There are problems. For example, the case we talked about on a previous episode that went on for 22 years and 7 appeals. So things do happen. But also a lot of times we do see people, reading a lot more into the stuff and misreading stuff. And, I hate to do it. I really hate to do it, but we do delete comments that just go into some of this incendiary stuff that we really, 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 really can't prove, or just is outright false. But so that's my read on it.
I think it's interesting because when I was younger, for example, and before going to school, for some reason, the idea of looking through legal documents was just the most intimidating thing. It's just like, I don't even think that I'm going to be able to begin to understand this, which is false. And anybody watching this, if you can understand and have, what's it called?
Preconceived notions about what's going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like exactly. It's just, it's hard to interpret material on your own. You either have the people who think that there's no way that they can begin to dive into anything, and then you have the people who take their preconceived notions and just run and make up the craziest and hardest things. And it's, the legal system is about finding that middle ground, and sometimes things go wrong, sometimes there's accidents, but at the end of the day, it's everybody really just trying their best to get everything done. With law enforcement, in this case, we're gonna have to see what happens with everything. It seems strange. This case is very strange, and it's something that we're gonna be looking forward to seeing what happens with, and hopefully covering a little bit more in the future.
Well, one of the interesting or not so interesting things is that I've been around long enough to remember back when the courts did not want cameras in them at all. I remember, covering these trials by going into the courthouse and sitting there in the courtroom and then running out to the camera and hoping you can pull somebody over to the camera and do an interview. Fortunately, for the most part, not in the federal courts, but fortunately for the most part, that's not the case anymore, and cameras are in the courtroom. We saw, Judge in the Kohberger case, going back and forth with the camera people, and then they didn't follow his instructions, and so he's doing it himself now. And we have court TV in this trial, and we've seen court coverage a lot of times, but a long time ago, and I hate to admit that I've been around watching it that long, cameras just were not allowed in the courtroom. The other thing is that now you can go onto the iCourt website and pull up many of the pleadings in the case. Now, it's true that a lot of them have been sealed and redacted, and we did an episode with Forensic Frenzy who showed some of the documents, and they're all whited out and redacted. But my point is that some of these things are available. There was a 41-page memorandum on the IGG issue, and so that's there. And anybody that cares to look at it, it's right there in the web. When I first started doing this a long time ago, you could get the stuff, but you had to, go into the court, go to the court clerk's office, ask for the docket. They weren't always very, happy about you doing that, but the reporters could do that. But then, they would have to either photocopy it all or keep it in their memory. And then when cell phones came around, take pictures of it. So the information was really hard to get a hold of back then. And so you had to rely on the reporters. And so, of course, there was a lot of criticism. Well, we don't know the reporters, portraying it accurately. There are really good reporters, and we've had one or two of them on this channel. And then there are others that are just, for whatever reason, they're not of that caliber. And I hate to say it, but so things have changed over the years, and now that stuff is available, redacted and sealed, but it's generally available, and the cameras are allowed in the courtroom. And I, in my opinion, think it's a good thing, not that it doesn't lead to some issues,
With the fact that technology has gone so far, especially even in just the past 20 years, you think about 20 years ago, it's like people were just starting to get cell phones, and the cell phones that you have probably couldn't even really take good pictures of the documents. I think it makes sense that things are so transparent. And it's ironic because you would think that with more transparency that people would have a little bit more trust in being able to see everything that's going on. And obviously, we're hearing about the case right now, but it's ironic because now that we can see more people, conspiracy theories also get a lot more leeway on the internet. So it's hard. I understand why there's concerns because you don't want people to get riled up and start acting irrationally, but at the same time, transparency, especially with what's happening in court, I think is important.
Oh, it's absolutely important. You're absolutely right. One of the problems in the Kohberger case is that, for 6 weeks after these horrible, horrible, horrible deaths took place back in November of 2022, the media, almost every single night, and I watch, because I'm a child of media and I watch TV news almost every single night. And in the morning, on the morning shows, these 4 children in Idaho are still missing, and there's still no solution. It's been, day 25 or whatever, still no arrest. And then they would repeat and show the pictures again. So a lot of interest was generated in this case. A lot of focus was generated on this case. People that read and watch and get their news however they get it were all, I hate to use the word ginned up, but hyped up. What's happening here? What's happening here? They might have put down the dishes they were doing and come over to the TV to say, what is going on here? So the whole nation is now watching this. And then all of a sudden they catch him, and there's an almost immediate non-dissemination order. Most of us call it a gag order, but it's called a non-dissemination order. So now, did you ever stand there by the washing machine when the washing machine, the water's running, then all of a sudden the water stops and the hose goes like that?
Mhm.
Well, that was the national attention. The hose just immediately went, and so this was created. The intense scrutiny of this case, the Kohberger case, the Idaho 4 case, was created by 6 weeks of every night, and then the court responding by just shutting everything down. So I hate to wave my hands in the camera, but I mean, this has been a created experience, and it's unfortunate. Now, one of the very interesting and dangerous things about the New Hampshire Verrill case that's going on as we record this is that the fact that law enforcement withheld evidence is going to be an issue in the case, because the judge has said that he will tell the jury that the state should have disclosed but did not disclose the evidence. And it is up to the jury whether or not and how that will determine witness credibility. And so, again, the state cannot use the previously withheld evidence. And there was an allegation, there was an indication that there were some other potential suspects. There was an allegation that drugs and a drug ring was involved. And does it sound familiar, Kohberger fans? And also there was an allegation that there was a hit out on this person, and it had nothing to do with the defendant that is on trial at this time. So, you know, the fact that the prosecution, or actually the law enforcement, withheld evidence wasn't like a quick fix. It went up to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and the defendant, who's currently on trial, said, hey, I think the indictment should be released. And the Supreme Court said, nah. They looked at it quite a bit. And then they said, this is wrong that law enforcement withheld the evidence until your trial, and it was only disclosed in the middle of the trial. But your remedy is not to dismiss, I should have said, the grand jury indictment. The remedy is that you get a retrial, and the prosecution is not going to be able to use that evidence. The defense can, and the judge can mention it to the jury. So now the prosecution kind of stepped on their own foot, or I should say law enforcement stepped on their own foot. And so that's how that's going to play out. And so, you know what? It's a sad case. It's too bad that happened. And I guess the least problem is that the taxpayers of New Hampshire will have to foot the bill for all of that. And the reporter we just talked to pointed out that, maybe a part of it is that the Attorney General's office in New Hampshire is way overburdened. Maybe they just have too many cases. And so that's how it goes. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I have a question. It's going to be the same judge?
That I honestly do not know. I
was thinking that contextually, if it was the same judge, that having that context that now the defense is able to use the evidence and that the prosecution didn't use it initially, I feel that could potentially lead to bias. Obviously, the judge's job is to be non-biased, but I think this is just my prediction, but I have a hunch that this is probably gonna be big for the defense, but we don't know.
We do not know. And again, Court TV is following this, and you can catch it live Monday, Friday, and we'll follow this case too, and we will let you know. So as I always say at the end of these episodes, thank you for all your comments. We love your comments. Be kind, be respectful. You don't know what the other guy in the world is going through, whether you're at the gas station or the grocery store or the big box store. Be polite, kind, respectful. And when you're in our comments, be polite, kind, and respectful. And if you read through our comments, which we do, there are people that disagree with us, and that's fine. There are people that disagree with us, but 2 rules: don't personalize it. I love it when people say, how can you be an attorney if you think, and then fill in the blank. And then the other thing is I had to delete a couple of them this week because they talked about how third parties had hurt them, and that's slander, and we're not going to let that go. And so, I pushed the delete button on those. So please comment. Let us know how you feel, but those are our 2 rules.
And we'll see you guys next time. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, guys.
You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.
And that's that.
That's that.
That's that.
One difference between the New Hampshire trial and the Idaho trial.
No tunnels.
How did you guess? There are no tunnels in New Hampshire because they call it the granite state, because the whole state is built on granite up there. So there are no tunnels. Although, you know what? In New Hampshire, there's a lot of horses.
A lot of horses, no tunnels. If people tell you there's tunnels, you tell them there's horses.
No tunnels in New Hampshire. Bye.